In order to provide Pakistan with durable compressor crankshafts, this small workshop directly uses the Dwanda process for production. Although their processing equipment is relatively simple, the quality of the crankshafts produced is still very good. In order to make durable crankshafts, the processing materials they choose are these high-quality steel pieces. First, the masters use high-end automatic cutting machines to gradually cut them into standard sizes. In order to shape them into the shape of crankshafts, the first process is to heat the steel pieces. However, the heating equipment they use is relatively simple. It only takes half an hour for the steel pieces to be gradually heated to bright red. At this time, the temperature of the steel pieces is as high as several hundred degrees. Even experienced masters dare not use their hands, but use common shovels. At that time, the masters will quickly beat and shape the steel pieces. Warm steel beating can not only quickly change the shape of the steel pieces, but also change the internal crystal particles, improving the overall mechanical properties. In the process of continuous beating and shaping, they do not have special tools to assist. Through simple equipment, the master feels that the crankshaft has been shaped into a rough outline very quickly, and it needs to be processed later. After pinking and breaks the crankshaft, he only needs to wait for the crankshaft to cool naturally. In order to facilitate the subsequent processing, the master will use the mold to mark the crankshaft. After the mark is done, the master needs to use the chair to cut the extra positions on both sides. The marked position also needs to be cut. After such cutting, it can not only improve the processing efficiency, but also save a lot of processing links. The crankshafts that have been simply processed will be transported to the processing workshop very quickly. Since the crankshaft is still a blank at this time, it is not so easy to fix it. In order to facilitate the use of the top fixation, the master will use the caliper to measure the center position and then punch out the positioning hole through the sample. When the sample is used to open the hole, the head will not slip. The blank crankshaft has been fixed quickly through the joint efforts of the two masters. Then the master can perform detailed processing on the surface. The first master processes the end shafts on both sides of the crankshaft. This processing process is relatively simple. You just need to control the size. Experienced processing masters. The processing was completed very quickly. The processing difficulty of the middle crank is relatively high. In order to prevent the angle from deviating, Fu first made detailed measurements and made marks. After having clear marks, it is necessary to carefully observe the cutting conditions when using the eccentric lathe for processing. When using the steel key to check the spacing between the cranks, because the lathe is relatively old, it takes 2.5 days for us to process such a crankshaft. After the crankshaft is processed, we can process the details. In order to facilitate the subsequent opening of the shaft groove on the front shaft, we will first use the drilling machine to open the positioning hole, and then use the blasting machine to cut it bit by bit. During the processing, in order to prevent the size from deviating, Fu has to use the mold to compare it many times. After an hour of cutting, the processing is completed very quickly. The process of processing the oil channel hole on the shaft is relatively simple. After their collective processing, on this compressor drive shaft, finally the processing is completed. How do you feel about the drive shaft processed in this way?